I think I'm live. I'm not sure. As always in this show, I'm never sure when I actually start. I'm gonna do the normal thing. I'm actually on time because it's 8 p.m. Central European time. First of all, I'm gonna say we're live on different social media. Twitter. And we're live at the Hangout. And we are live at the extra Fan Hangout. And the link. Hello, everyone. Hopefully people will join in soon. Can people hear me? Can people see me? Oh, I realize I'm looking down at the screen. I will add the join in link soon on the thing. For future streams, I am, however, going to try to do something a bit different. I'm going to try to see if I can find a kind of link which will allow me to only have a number of people click on it. Because not the last stream, but the last proper long time hangout, there were a lot of people who joined. It was fun, but I see a problem because that was before my latest video came out, and now that I'm back, my latest video has gotten a lot of attention, which is good. I like that. I like that, at least compared to my other videos. And then I expect this trend to, as I keep making videos, I expect my content to grow. And I want to keep having these hangouts. And I won't be able to do that because they're public. And if I have a large audience, larger, then that will become unstable. So I can't just have the open link for anyone to click. So I'm looking into that. But for today, later in a bit, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have a I'm gonna write the join in thing. So if you have a webcam or a microphone, you can join in and talk to me as we discuss today's subject. If you only want to be in the chat to write, that's fine too. Today we are in my bedroom, which is why you have the old creaky bed and a bit of echoey wall sounds. But that's just the way it is sometimes. That's just the way it do. I'm gonna tell you what the topic is for today, and then I'm gonna have some news, just in general, as I always do. Today I'm gonna be streaming for I think 45 minutes, maybe a full hour if things go good. The reason I'm having this extra bonus stream was that last week I had I was supposed to have a hangout session, but I was kind of expecting to be done with the video before that. But as it so happened, I was editing, and I was editing right up until the final minutes before the hangout, which meant that I was uploading the video during the hangout, and everything kind of just crashed. And I kind of just wanted to have the video up and over with and have it done. The topic for then was gonna be the topic for this hangout, which is whiteness, the fascination with the right-wing fascination with Europe and the Nordic countries specifically, and talk a bit about that, as well as maybe talk about something. If someone has any ideas or questions or feedback or anything about the video, if you haven't seen that, I suggest you do. It's called Sweden, Heaven, and Hell. It's good. So the topic for today is going to be basically Nordicism, talking about Nordicism, but in a more broader sense, right? Because we have had other YouTube historians saying weird shit in the last week about whiteness. I'm thinking about Stefan Molyneux, who is a moron. If you have questions, I will try to answer them. But you should know that this is not the Ask Me Anything hangout thing, because that's a thing for Patreons. But we, that's another sphere. And if you ask a question here, I will try to answer it anyway. But I will try to do my best to keep everything balanced. My country's aflame. What's your suggestion for what my people should do? That's Dan. That's a friend. I think that Britain should get a grip. Honestly, like I kind of want to make a video about Brexit from like the European perspective, because Sweden is part of the EU, right? And we're not that skeptical of the EU, and it's been very interesting. But that's a topic for another time. I can talk about that later. So some news, first of all. I'm back. First of all, I did the video. I'm back. I'm not fully healed or recovered for exhaustion, which is the reason why I went on a hiatus for several months. But I'm back, which is great. And I do. Okay, so just about the Nordicism. That ain't my territory, so good luck with the stream. God bless you. Make a video about Brexit, please, I beg you. Brexit would be interesting to make a video about. But it would have to be from a European perspective, right? Because I'm not British, and I visited the UK, but that's it. And like a lot of my fans are British, and I've basically been seeing nothing about Brexit from them. But the news here are about Brexit as well, so I have no idea how important that actually is. Who knows? And because this is a Hangout session, also, before I actually started an actual Hangout thing, I'm going to do this for a while. This is just a place where we hang out, and we have a topic, but we usually drift from that topic. If someone has a comment, or if someone has like a story to tell, we usually do that too. Like, we're not that, like, I'm pretty chill. This is just a session for me to hang out with my fans and have fun. Have a big old hang. EU perspective is certainly interesting, honestly. Brits are culturally very different to someone like a Swede. Brits are basically super sick of it. I can see that. Okay. So the topic for today is the right-wing fascination with Europe, or when we talk about in right-wing groups within Europe, like this neo-nationalism thing. Keep bumping into my microphone. I'm sorry about that. So now I think it's time to invite a few people. And the way we do this, because I want to have this ordered and structured, I'm probably going to have to do kind of an invite-only thing in the future, where people like sign up that they want to take part, and then I have to pick some at random, something like that, or in order, so it's a bit more fair. That's probably the more ordered way to do it. But for today, I feel like you come in, people will see that you come in because we're already live, and then I might be talking, but at the end of a sentence, then I will say like, okay, well, who are you? And you can introduce yourself, even if you've been on the stream before at prior Hangouts. It's nice if you introduce yourself so new people know who you are. And then, you don't have to participate a lot, and you don't have to talk a lot. But if you do, you're welcome too. So yeah, I think I forget something, but that's fine. Let's invite people. If people want to talk in the chat, that's fine too. People can just hang out. If people want to have conversations or ask questions in the chat, that's fine. This is a Hangout session. Like, I also want to say that before we start, that this is, and before I throw out the link, that this Hangout session is very informal, right? There are no rules. We can do what we want. Like, I remember a couple of streams ago, we talked about this. So, like this we talked about Saudi Arabia, and we also talked about something else, but we kept flipping topics. It's interesting. So I'm gonna click up the link now, and it should get up in a bit. And if you want to join, via a webcam and a microphone, then you are welcome to. Otherwise, you're always welcome in the chat. I feel like the nationalism of Western civilization loving has become a global phenomenon, thanks to how interconnected everyone is due to the internet. American culture is, unfortunately, more influential than ever. I hate that. It's true, but I hate it. Hence, how you end up with so many vocal Trump supporters who aren't even Americans. That's a thing. I see a lot of like right wingers in Sweden having the Trump, MAGA, Make America Great Again hats, and I don't get that. It's so weird. It's really weird, like, because he's an American politician. His idea is America first, and like, why would people who aren't Americans even be on board with that? And the answer is because they're racist. That surely has also spread to European white nationalists. Probably. At least in Germany, the right wingers definitely don't love Trump, or at least you don't see it. That's interesting, because that is the case in Sweden. Okay, we have Philosopher King. Hello, friend.
Hey. How's it going?
Can I hear you?
I don't know. I can hear you. Can you? Oh.
No, the audience can probably hear you, but I can't because I muted my own sound for some reason.
Okay. All right. I hope the audience can hear me.
Hang on. I'm sorry. There we go. Yes. I had Spotify running, so
okay. Yeah.
For some reason, I muted my own sound instead of...
Yeah. It's like Spotify was playing, but it was muted, so it was just going into the abyss.
Hello, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is Philosopher King. I just do some commentary. At this point I sort of just do interviews and hangouts with people on YouTube. So if anyone's interested in listening to like 3-hour like random discussions, then yeah, you can find that on my channel. I think it's interesting that that you brought up Stefan Molyneux, because I feel like in the last week he's kind of gone full blown like fascist, basically. Like no pretense of needing to dog whistle or anything. Now it's full race IQ stuff and Nordicism, like you said. He had this interesting tweet about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like he tweeted this thing, I just saw it today, where he was like, oh well, her constituents are mostly mostly Puerto Rican, and Puerto Ricans have a low IQ, no wonder they're destroying the country, basically.
Oh god.
Yeah, and it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, like these people, like
that's pretty explicit racism too. Like that's not something that like during the last 20 years or something, you've always seen like flat out racists at least try to hide it in dog whistles, but they're becoming like more open about it, which is weird.
Yeah,
like, he had this long rant also when he was about, like, he visited Poland or something. It was a video, actually. Yeah, it was a video about talking about it when he visited Poland, and he said like, oh, they're all white people, and also the streets are clean. Surely there's a correlation. And it's like, what?
It's like, well, I'm an empiricist, so
the evidence speaks for itself. And I find it interesting that he uses Poland as an example, because Poland is has during the last couple of years not been that great as an example of when talking about like, because they all say that they're they're libertarians or they're liberal, they believe in the concept of liberal democracy, right? Western civilization, etc., etc., etc. But the values that they think are Western civilization aren't really represented in Poland currently. Like, it's
they're obsessed with the whiteness. It's not about like these other things.
Oh yeah.
But like I don't know. I mean, this is one of the more interesting things, like the confluence of different ideologies that comes into play with these types of people. Like they're forging a new form of fascism, is like the way I would put it. I saw this interesting interview with, it was Tucker Carlson and what's his name? Ben Shapiro. And it was really interesting for a number of reasons. So Tucker, the way that his anti-capitalism sort of manifests itself is like, it's very interesting to see, like Ben asked him like, oh well, like what would you do about the rise of automation? It's going to put a lot of people out of work. And Tucker was like, we should stop it completely. We should make it illegal to automate certain jobs because and that's very anti-capitalistic.
Yeah, like that is. I don't even know what that is in economic policy. That's just like economic. That's not even conservatism. That's just like
it's a new type of like nationalism. Like that's really what it is. It's about your people and your nation's things are most important. But there is like a racial element to it. It's like they care about white working class people, and that's their new frame. Like that's how people like that are going to talk about it. They don't really care about the actual working class in places or like the United States where they're mostly not white. They care about helping the white working class.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird it's totally different axis than what most people are used to seeing. And yeah, I mean, I found that interview really, really interesting because it's like, oh, this is where I think the right in a lot of places is going. This is what it's about now. They view capitalism as an enemy, but not in the way that the left views it as an enemy.
Yeah, and I hate to like pull the historian like tale every time, but it's kind of like they use anti-capitalist language, right, without actually being practically anti-capitalist. It's just like in some areas they arguably could be, but in general, it's not like they're advocating for the dismantling of capitalism. It's just using the language of that in order to have some kind of plausible deniability when people say that they're against the working class, which is what the Nazis did. And I hate to bring that comparison, but this is an actual time when that comparison is valid, because that is basically National Socialism, where the socialism bit is worthless, and only this idea of we should take care of our own people before anyone else. And the socialism is not what the left uses in socialism. The socialism in National Socialism is just this: we should protect our own race, which is God damn it.
Yeah,
it's so obvious.
So the thing that was most interesting to me, or well, one of them, was like looking at the comments, and all of the top-rated comments were all extremely anti-Semitic, all of them, right? And so the people who are watching this, so like Tucker Carlson's audience, like they get it, they see that this is about a racial nationalism, and that a bunch of these things, capitalism doesn't help their racial nationalist agenda. Like certain technologies don't, like social media. Like another thing that's interesting is like Tucker is basically in favor of either nationalizing or breaking up the major tech companies, right? So it's like they just look at whatever it is that's sort of not helping us being, white people or whatever. They're willing to use the state or any type of power structure to disrupt it and stop it from, harming them. Because like, if you look at like the people that Tucker talks about the most in terms of like his anti-capitalist language, it's people who, like Jeff Bezos, who runs the Washington Post, which attacks conservatives, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like he had a really big issue with Nike using Colin Kaepernick, who kneeled at the national anthem, as their spokesperson, right? And that was one of the really interesting things, because he was like, I guess basically he was like, oh, I realized that the capitalist class is going to sell out our nationalistic interests in order to make money, right?
Yeah.
And so for them, that's a huge breaking point. If the capitalists are willing to do things that undermine the white nationalistic identity, then they have to be thrown overboard too. They need to be gotten rid of. So you can't even, have them as an escape valve.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me to like, because this neo-nationalist turn it's fairly recent, because I still remember this might have been because I was a kid, but I still remember like being somewhat young and people talking about like how the the left wanted basically communism, and that's what they say today too. But how the right at least wanted to have this interconnected global society, but in a very like market oriented way, right? But that is not, you don't see that as much anymore. That's basically being seen as another fringe point. And it's interesting that this like hyper capitalistic idea has become less mainstream and kind of, well, it's still very mainstream obviously, but it's slowly being like overtaken by this protectionist racial idealism basically. And I think Stefan Molyneux's rant about Poland is very like typical of that, because the only positive bit, like talking about like Poland is a nice country in many ways, right? But like there's nothing that stands out about Poland compared to other countries around them, except for there's more white people. And I include both like the political way that existed within Poland, although they've been kind of sketchy in the last couple of years. But also when talking about like GDP per capita and the Human Development Index and stuff, things like that. So there's nothing that says like, I mean, he's an empiricist, but being an empiricist doesn't matter apparently, because. But it kind of works within his own logic, right? Because even the existence of white people is a positive in and of itself. And if that is factored into the equation, then that becomes like empirically, logically, within their own twisted logic, obviously, it becomes coherent. God damn it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting. I would definitely implore people to watch some parts of that Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson interview, because like I feel like it's a really good vein into like where the right wing across the globe is going. Like it's not now it's about nationalism versus globalism, and for them nationalism means there's not one singular idea about what it is. It's a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it just is kind of self-contradictory and doesn't really make sense, not actually coherent or cogent. Like race in and of itself is not a cogent. The way they talk about it is not a cogent thing. It is not a scientific thing. But they like have built up these structures over time. And racism is a very much so a capitalistic creation, right? So like if you have a bunch of people who are enslaved, how do you prevent them and other poor people from aligning within their interests to overthrow the people who are, reaping the benefits of that? Well, you say, oh, these people, they are genetically inferior, and that's why we enslave them.
They are different from like the poor class exactly. In a very fundamental way, so that an allyship should be illogical for the working class to do. It's basically dividing, dividing potential opposition to the current system as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, because there were a few times when there was actual alliances between poor whites and blacks or black slaves, and that was a big problem for these types of elites. So they had to, put a lot of time, effort, and money into generating this type of race ideology, so that they could never be these alliances.
Yeah, there's I don't remember who it is, but I remember seeing some YouTuber who's, I think he's a centrist, I'm not sure, but he talked about the concept of like this fascination with whiteness, right? This construction of whiteness, and who is and isn't included in whiteness. And he talked, for example, how the Irish weren't always considered equal to like Anglo-Saxons, and how whiteness is a fairly new concept, like similar to my video, but not in a different direction. But he ended the video by just asking people who believe in this like white culture, white genocide, white heritage, this type of bullshit, asking them like, are are Greek are the Greeks white? Are Italians white? Are Spanish people white? Because according to some definitions of whiteness, they would not fall under that. But when talking about like white history or white, heritage or something, they always almost track back to that. But that just goes back into like old Nordicism, when people pretend history was different by saying that the leaders of those societies were white, and not the people. This is becoming a weird rant, and I'm gonna chill because I feel like I'm leaving my zone.
Yeah.
But I think I think the question was interestingly put, because the right wingers in the audience who were like criticizing this couldn't come up with a coherent answer.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course not. Because like some people would say, like, well, of course the Italians are white because they're Romans and the Roman built the Roman Empire, etc. And then we had some people who say, like, well, they're not true Aryans or whatever that bullshit. Which is like, as soon as you like pick something to actually dissect, the entire ideology just falls apart.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And they've constructed these things like race or whiteness or other things, and its only purpose is to serve their power structure. And as long as people believe in it, it has value. But if people are like, well, race isn't really like, if in the United States, if people stopped thinking racially and thought in a more class-based orientation, it would completely change the country, completely. Because there's a lot of people who have a not like white nationalist type of identity, but like they have a very like, I need to vote for Republican so that I can withhold some type of white power structure, and that very deeply ingrained mindset has stopped a lot of progress in terms of like creating like economic justice for people, pretty much. And so, yeah, I mean, it's very useful as long as people actually believe in it.
Oh, yeah. God damn.
But the thing is, like, the justification, people, like, it's kind of easy because I think one of the things that the right does is they take big concepts and they try to make them as simple as possible, but they obscure a lot of truth by doing that.
Yeah.
And people like, so take race, for example, right? So when people look at someone and you see their skin or you see their eyes or you see their hair, like most people make a snap sort of understanding of like what type of person they are, right? So you could be someone who is really light skinned, but you're actually African, right? But like that person would say, oh, this person's like white, right? And so that's an easy way of understanding race. And so, but when you like take it to the, like a genetic level, it sort of breaks down. It's not totally consistent. But for these nationalists, they don't need it to be consistent. They just need it to work within a certain frame, because people still, they still think, oh, this person has light skin, therefore they're probably white, or they're probably European, or they have blue eyes and light skin and long hair that's not curly, they must be white,
Yeah. The more generalized the idea is, the easier it is to kind of like explain away the fallacies within it, right? Because it's so, the broader the ideology is, it will encompass more and more faults, but it will also like have more and more exceptions to itself, and which it sees itself like, it sees itself as a good thing in this aspect, right? Because then they can also have plausible deniability when they say like, well, it's not about specifically race, it's about like culture or something like that, or like values and Western values, and that is what like whiteness is. But obviously that's bullshit. But like, because it has so many layers of bullshit, it's hard to like pinpoint any one of them, because they're all dealt with they're all dealt with internally in a way that like, well, sure, but the further back you go and the further back you dig, it's like this is all just layers and layers, and there's no core to it. It's just it's all frosting and no cake.
Yeah, it's like an onion, and you get to the middle and it's hollow.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's totally nothing.
So this has been a long discussion about whiteness specifically. Like, I don't know how it is in America right now, because I've seen it's like whenever I hear about people talking about Europe in American media, it's always it always talks about, like, the migrant crisis, or the refugee intake issues, or as it is usually when we're talking about Fox News, it's just people burning cars and shit. But is it like, is there in the American zeitgeist a kind of idea about like is there, because I have a hard time seeing this, right? Because I only see a bunch of Nazis. Is there an idea of like white identity politics currently? Because there is in Europe, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, American like white identity politics is very interesting because, it's existed for a long time. It's basically existed as long as the country, right? But the question of who is white has changed very frequently. So like at first, white was basically people who are English or British or some type of British descent. So there's this funny stuff Ben Franklin wrote about how he hated Germans, right?
Germans.
Yeah, he hated Germans, and that lasted for a long time. Like there was a lot of anti-German resentment, and it sort of waned after the Civil War, and then it rose again in World War I and World War II.
Yeah, obviously.
And so they were basically kind of considered not really white. They're not really like within the white power structure, right? And so then, then there was like the Irish. The Irish weren't white for a long time, and then Italians and Eastern Europeans were also not considered white in like the early 1900s. But yeah, over time, a lot of these different people have been assimilated, and basically then the next change was. After the Civil Rights Movement, they started running the Southern strategy, which was the Republicans would use dog whistling to tell Southern voters that you can't vote for Democrats because they voted for the Civil Rights Act and gave Black people the right to vote. And that is sort of still where we're at, which is kind of scary.
We're still within in that kind of ideological
yes.
umbrella, that ideological era.
So like white identity politics is like talking about welfare, talking about voter fraud, talking about people seeking refugee status, people in caravans. That's white identity politics now. It's like you use dog whistling terms to make these people feel like they're being threatened by an outside force that is racially different. Yeah. Like there's almost never been a time when there's been a moral panic about white people coming illegally or something like that.
Yeah. There's a comment that I kind of want to dig into from Ryan Kolak. In America for the last decade or so, white identity politics have consisted of panic due to the shifting demographics. But the question I have about that, has the demographics shifted?
Yeah, it's sort of about demographics now, but I would say that during the peak of like the Southern strategy, it wasn't really as much about demographics as much about sort of fear of the other. So like, George Herbert Walker Bush died recently. One of the most famous ads he ran was this ad about Willie Horton, a Black guy who got sent out of prison or something like that. That was an explicitly racialized type of advertisement, and it worked, right?
Yeah,
people saw that, they got scared, like, oh my God, Black people are gonna be jumping out of prison and killing me in my wife's suburban gated community, so I have to vote for Republicans. Like that's been consistent since like 1968. They've been running that, and I can the demographic stuff is more recent.
Yeah, because I can kind of and I think it kind of still is the same like dog whistle tactics. Although I might be completely as wrong, but like people use the same arguments, like for here in Sweden, for example, where people say that we're not actually racist, we're not actually like worried about the other, but we're worried about shifting demographics. We're worried about like the native population being displaced by a new population, which is bullshit. But also, Um, I feel like even within that logic, I don't think that, because I don't think that the demographics have actually changed that much. Like a lot, like large parts of Europe, I would like Sweden more than many other countries to gain a large number of refugee from Syria per capita, right? But that's not that many. If I use Sweden as an example, like Sweden has had now for a long time a population of about like 9 to 10 million people, and has been steadily like slowly rising as you know at a normal just curve proportional to the population, and that hasn't really changed since we took in like a lot of refugees, because we didn't take in that many. And I think that people overestimate a lot. I think people overestimate a lot of like refugee intake and asylum applications and all of these things in order to justify this hatred of the other, in order to justify this outside fear, right? Because when people talk about like people moving into Sweden, for example, the Sweden's largest minority is Finnish people, and has been for hundreds of years. The greatest immigration into Sweden comes from America. It's just business people moving here. But no one talks about that, obviously, because that's not the fear of the other in the same way. And it's hard to justify racism against Americans in the same way, unfortunately.
Those swarthy Americans.
Goddamn Americans coming in here taking our jobs. But I feel like people still use the numbers, right? Because people, like, if I were to move to America, for example, people will still use the number, like this many immigrants have arrived to America within these couple of years.
Exactly.
And it's like, and then they have like a picture of like the migrant caravan or something, like 8 million people have arrived in America in the last week or something. And it's like, yeah, but most of those people are probably like tourists or something, business people, but they use these numbers in order to have this like exaggerated idea of how many are coming in, which I think also which I think is kind of one of the causes about this like panic about demographics, because I don't think the demographics have changed. I think the demographics change more based on, based on like the bombing of Yemen, or supporting like weird shit in Syria, or doing like weird international shit in all over the world. I think that will fuck with the demographics, but it's just like this. I think it's okay. I found my point. The point about all of this is not to say that like demographics matter, because they don't. It's a bullshit conversation, but it's a bullshit conversation that I think that the right wing has kind of tricked the left into having, because
I think that's right.
Because I see a lot of people like defending, saying that what does it matter if white people become a minority, because then that's already like acknowledging the point, instead of just saying that the entire point is bullshit. And that is the point that I'm trying to say, that the entire idea of demographic changing and demographics being a threat is bullshit. That is manufactured, and just it fits into the idea of conflict, right? That I mentioned in the video. This is a long rant, I'm sorry. It fits into this idea of constant conflict, because if there is conflict, then you can justify anything in order to like defend yourself. And I think at least that the entire idea of demographics is just a shift in tactics from the right. I don't think that there has ever actually been any kind of actual material change. I think it's just a tactical change, where people go from being flat out racist into just taking all of the data that they can, because we live in a more digital era now than we did 10 years ago. We can just take all the data you can and model it up so bad that you can just say that these numbers mean anything. God, I'm sorry. It was a long rant.
For sure. Like, I definitely think that's a really good point, especially about the United States, because who's the easiest for people to get here, right? It's be someone like yourself, or a European. Like, like
Yeah.
someone from a Western European or Northern European country. That's the easiest for people to immigrate. Everyone else is very hard. It's very hard for people from Asia to get here. Very
Yeah.
hard for people from South America to get here. And yeah, like you said, they just take, 2 million people immigrated to the United States. Here's pictures of the caravan, right? They juxtapose that, but they are not related at all.
No,
Like
not at all.
the people that we legally take into the country are mostly, probably the like the numbers that they're trying to say 100% of this 2 million are, not white. It's not true. It's not true at all.
Oh yeah, no, of course not. Like it's mostly white people, I think. Like it's when people think of the typical immigrant, they imagine like this family of illegals from like El Salvador or something, and they don't imagine like John Oliver, which is most probably the thing that they're actually. That's probably more typical of an immigrant into America.
Mm-hmm.
A thing that I kind of want to point out as well, that I was going to say this, but I forgot it. Like in Germany, recent estimates say that 21% of the population has a migrant background, and that is how a lot of countries measure demographics right now, because it's hard to keep demographics today, thankfully, of like how many white people there are. Because then you have to define what a white person is.
Yes.
And that's hard, as we mentioned before. So instead you have a migrant background. The thing about that is, I think Americans do this too, where I see a lot of like how much of the native population. I say native population, obviously not the like Native Americans. I'm saying like angry white people.
The white conquerors who overthrew the poor, the natives.
Oh yeah, the natives. As they say, they also use this term like migrant background, but it's such a useless term because it doesn't actually mean anything. It just means that, at least in a lot of European countries, it means that one of your parents was born outside of the country, which is my case, like which technically means that I'm an immigrant, and that my family is an immigrant family, which is like technically definitionally true, I guess. But when it comes to actual meaning, there is none, obviously. But still, I know that the statistics of my existence within Sweden is used to justify hatred and discrimination against people who do need to come here, like who are refugees and who are like victims of discrimination and victims of racism who need protection. And I know that a lot of this argumentation is just so fabricated and takes in a lot of people that doesn't actually have anything to do with it and use it to hate on other people. God, sorry, that's a long rant again. I keep missing my points.
So another interesting, like, sort of facet of the racial identity stuff in America. There was a Republican. I guess he was part of like the RNC or something, like the Republican National Committee, and he was talking about like how basically he was talking about like what is Republicanism going to be going forward. And one of the things they talked about was like in this U.S. Senate race in Texas. There was a lot of, so basically what they found was like there was a lot of Hispanic people who identify themselves as white, like they would write "I am white" on a whatever, like kind of a census, and those people were far more Republican than people who didn't see themselves as white, and so they see those people as the future of their party. They're going to try and take these people in, these people who identify themselves as white, even though maybe other people wouldn't see them as white because they're Hispanic. And so it's like, again, it's like this white coalition, the people who identify themselves as white and vote Republican. Like this is the type of, we see it shifting in real time, right? Like they need these people in their coalition in places like Texas, because if they don't have them, they have no shot of winning. And
it's this generalization of ideology, just in order to survive as a fringe idea. It just has to keep expanding and just include more and more people, otherwise, in order to justify itself.
Yeah, and again, like he was sort of admitting, like our party is based on people who think they're white. Like that's the core of the party. People who think they're white. Doesn't matter like where they came from or what they who they are. Like, it's either people who believe that they're white, or they have some type of financial interest. That's the coalition, basically.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and I think it's hard to like describe the current Republican Party in this way, and like ideology-wise, it's like, because it's obviously like they would never call themselves any kind of like, they're nationalists, obviously.
Yeah,
you could call them social conservatives, but they're not that social in order, like, but depending on the definition of that word. And I think we're approaching like a new type of, I think we're approaching like a new kind of political allyship that will need like new descriptors, right? Because
for sure,
as you say, like this is built on like white identity politics, but also financial interest, which is wasn't really the case 100 years ago when many of the terms that we use today were coined, where financial interest was not relevant, compared to the race question, right? But today they are more, but not, they're not disconnected, obviously, but they're not combined either. But there are elements of both. So how do you describe that? Because the words we use are so outdated.
It's like you said, it's like neo-nationalism or something. It's like 21st century nationalism.
Yeah, I think people really need to like use the word neo more, because when I first did the research, like for the video talking about like Nordicism, I thought like a lot of Nordicism doesn't really apply, but that a lot of the ideas are still around, but the specific examples don't really match up anymore. And I think that's the case for a lot of political ideologies, like even conservatism, at least in Europe. And I think we need to have like, we need a new dictionary of just political descriptors.
For sure. I mean, especially in the United States, like I think that was the one thing that Trump got right. Like, the conservatives don't want someone who can like read verses from Milton Friedman texts verbatim. They don't want that. They want someone who understands the culture war is about whiteness versus non-whiteness, nationalism versus globalism, and someone who's willing to lie and do whatever they can to give them power, because that's what they really want. They just want power. That's all they care about.
And I think that that is something that I think a lot of people on the left kind of underestimate Trump a bit, because Trump has kind of shaken up the entire political word use, because it's impossible to describe him. It's impossible to describe what is his ideology. He might have one, but the current words that we use today would not fit. Which kind
he's
of
an enigma.
Yeah, exactly. But that works super well for him and for his supporters, right? Because they can, because they know what it is, they can identify it, and they definitely know it. Like I have a thing, like my new hobby, my latest guilty pleasure is going on YouTube and watching Trump supporters trying to explain why they like what Trump is doing. Or trying to say like, because they will say like, oh, what do you like about Trump? And they answer like, well, I like a lot of the things he's done. And they go like, name one. And they can't. And they can't.
No, they can't.
But they still support him. And I think that a lot of right-wingers, they might not know why they support this ideology, but they do, and they can identify it. And I don't think the people on the left can in the same way. I think we can see it when we see it, right? But we have a hard time to describe it, and we have a hard time to fight it. Unfortunately, I would think otherwise, but it's not going so well.
Yeah, I think things in the States are going better. The midterms went really, really well. Just a quick side note on that. It was kind of interesting. Like this was really crazy. Like the election was actually extremely crazy. There was a point in the election where like all the like sites that did predictions were showing that the Republicans were actually going to win more seats in the House. And man, I mean, watching Twitter at that point was like watching the end of the world. My God, it was crazy.
I can imagine.
And so, yeah, a lot of people were doomsday, saying there was a guy in Chapo Trap House who said, shoot everyone in your vicinity and then kill yourself, which was really funny. But
the more I have never heard Chapo.
Yeah.
Quick side note: I've never listened to Chapo. I don't know really what it is. The more I cannot like. Every time I hear it described, it's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's very bro-y. It's very random. it's super weird.
It seems like
I guess
it seems like it's Game Grumps for leftists.
yeah, it's very strange. So I guess my point is like I think there's a problem on the left where the left is always defeatist, and that was a really good example. So like things on election day didn't look as big of a wave as people expected. So on election day, the Democrats gained 25 seats. 3 weeks out, they gained 40. Okay, and so that with the, to me, with the effect that's so interesting is that on the day of, there was a lot of defeatism on the left, and then on top of that, the right immediately jumped on that, and they were like saying it wasn't a blue wave, no blue wave. This doesn't say anything about Trump, blah blah blah. And so they immediately attacked, but people on the left were kind of like, I don't know, maybe they're right, blah blah blah. And then the infighting happened like immediately. But this midterm was one of the, basically since universal suffrage, it was the highest participation midterm ever.
Yeah, I heard about that.
The Republicans lost by the most votes basically ever. So it was a huge swing. It was like the highest in terms of like, I think the best takeaway is, since everyone could vote, it was one of the highest swings in terms of one party winning over the other. And so that's a huge win for the left, but no one's really taking any credit for it. No one's saying, yeah, like this is a repudiation of Trumpian politics. This is a repudiation of the Republican Party.
Yeah, that's kind of true actually. Like I've seen the success, but I haven't really seen anyone saying like, let's mobilize this. Let's like take advantage of the success and actually like use it or make something out of it. I've just seen like, this is the new status quo, and everyone is like, oh well, Trump is still president, so everything still sucks, which is like I get it because I'm also defeatist, but also it's okay to celebrate something.
But honestly, I feel like that's another thing about the right is like they love shoveling it in their enemy's face. We beat you, haha! It's because you suck. It's because you're this. It's because you're that. And if only you were more like us, more right wing, then maybe you would win. Like we should, like, where are the leftists out there saying if only you Republicans were in favor of universal health care, you would win. If only you were in favor of getting rid of Trump, you would win. Like, but no one's out there saying that. But like that seems just as valid as the opposite, right?
Yeah, and like I remember this after Trump won also, and during the Trump campaign when people said that, like, that it's when they go low, we go high, and something like that. And I think that there's a point to that, right? But I don't remember who made a video about that. I think it was like Innuendo Studios or something, who talked about how the left is now going also low or something, and that is also like ruining democratic institutions in another way. But I think, I think that the left has this tendency of like trying to be perfect or trying to like be internally pure in order to like justify their own existence within the left movement and not focusing on justifying their existence and position in society at large. And this happens even like on the small scale, but also like on politician scale. And I think that might have had something to do with it when people don't want to take up too much space, basically, and people don't want to talk over others, and people don't want to like be. I think it's just people don't want to be rude, or even be construed as being rude, because then they could potentially be lumped in with with Republicans, right? That's a stretch. And I think that politicians specifically need to stand their own ground a little bit more and not think of optics as much, because not thinking of optics, like only thinking of optics, is ironically bad optics. And I think that people need to, yes, because I think Cortez did a good thing. Like in the election, right? Because she has been more outspoken. She has been taking up more space. She has been more critical of not just like the Democratic Party, but also specifically, but also the right, and the Republicans. And I feel like a lot of Democrats they only want to do one thing at a time in order to not alienate themselves. But it's working for Cortez, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the problems is like when we parse off like how leftist someone is. Like, is the Democratic Party a leftist party? No, absolutely not. Not right now. Um, are they moving to the left more than they have in the last 10 years? For sure. And I think the strong point to be made about that is like them having power is good for left-wing politics across the planet, because the alternative to them not having power is basically overt fascism in the United States. Like if the Democrats didn't win, the Republicans and Trump would have immediately gone and snuffed out all investigations, doubled down on their anti-human policies, like cutting more taxes for the rich, gutting more healthcare. They would have completely gutted Obamacare and like thrown people off of healthcare, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's a win for the left, right? Stopping that is a win for the left. Are they, is Nancy Pelosi a socialist? No. Is Nancy Pelosi better than whoever the fuck the alternative would be? Yes, but like we're trying to move her to the left.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think a proper comparison would be, because a lot of people hate. I'm gonna do history again because I'm an historian. That's all I do, and that's all I know. Like, I think a prompt comparison would kind of be like Weimar Germany, right? It's this political chaos, and everyone hates the Weimar Republic. Everyone hates this like semi-centrist point of view which exists, but everyone is kind of agreed that it's far better than what came afterwards, and it's far better than the far right. And I think that's important to take note of. Like, ironically, it's kind of using, what's a good word for it? I don't want to say conservative, but like anti-reactionary politics instead of progressive ones. And a lot of time those two are connected, but not always. And I think that in the case of the Democratic Party, I feel that it's anti-reactionary politics because it goes against what the Republican Party wants some of the time, not all of the time, but like some of the time. And I feel that there is value there, despite huge improvement that can be made.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people kind of ignore that because it's, like America can, because America has two parties. America can either be awful or America can be the worst. And I think a lot of people would prefer America to just be awful.
It's like, I think people need to sort of think of it this way. The United States is the most powerful empire in the history of the human race at this point, right? And so every president is basically an emperor, and the emperor has the power to, like Trump could tomorrow decide, fuck it, I want to blow up the whole planet. He presses a button, he fires nukes across the planet, it's game over, right? It's game over. And he could probably live through it too. Like, they put him in a bunker and he'd live. But like the point I'm making is like it's an empire. So within the empire, it's hard to like change the structural nature of the military, the structural nature of like the power hierarchies that exist almost outside of the scope of any single person. And that's why you have Obama and Bush have very similar foreign policy, because the country is just so powerful and they have so many interests in so many different places that it's just perpetuating itself until it collapses.
Yeah. The structure is the politics.
Yeah, exactly. And the structure is like self-preserving and self-reinforcing, because like there's a lot of talk about like what should the left-wing foreign policy be, and there's a lot of kind of contradictory type of things. Like someone brought up the good case of like we should be non-interventionist, right? But like, how do we deal with somewhere like Taiwan? If Taiwan got invaded by China, should we do nothing or should we help them? Like, there's a lot of, and that's built into the structure of the empire, right?
Yeah, and that's also kind of scary because that has been like the historical case for a lot of like large, like a lot of large different just national organizations or countries or empires or whatever, and that happens a lot where the bureaucracy takes over and the bureaucracy, or the structure or the hierarchies or whatever. The mere fact of them existing just perpetuates this policy that is hard to change without changing the entire thing. And historically, that has almost always only happened either with revolution or with people from the north invading. It's always people from the north invading. God damn it! Yeah, it's barbarians from Germany. It's Mongolians from the north. We need Canada to invade.
Yeah,
that will break up America.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna follow the historical patterns anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Alternatively, the French can invade because that also works.
Yeah, yeah. I was curious if I could get your opinion. Like, have you looked into it all the strikes that are happening in France?
I have. This is a good topic to shift to because we've been talking about racism for a while, and I feel knowledgeable talking about like the ideology behind it and stuff like that. But there comes a point where it's like I'm white as fuck. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, I don't want to say too much on this topic.
Sure. Yeah.
Someone's gonna take this out of context and just have this like, here I am talking about shit I don't know about. But yeah, the Yellow Jacket Rebellion in France, they're going
to overthrow
the Yellow Jacket protests in France. They've kind of spread across Europe now, so it's kind of.
Oh, okay.
It's not just in France. It's not big though. I think it's in France. It's really big, but like there are Yellow Jackets in Sweden, but they are not big at all. I think it's complicated. I think it's one of these uprisings where people have. I don't think it's like most people think that it wasn't planned, it wasn't organized, it just happened, right? It's spontaneous uprisings, and I think just by nature of that, it's going to be hard for such an uprising to have like a proper ideological base. Now, I did a tweet about this a couple of days ago. Might have been yesterday, but now I've done a bit more reading about it. And so the uprising starts with people being angry at a gas tax, right, for cars.
Yep.
That makes it more expensive, which makes it harder to live for people who have cars and need gas to travel for work and stuff. And that's that. Like when I first read about that, it was like that's weird. I don't like. Because I'm in general I'm in favor of gas taxes, but then I read into it and it's like this is the worst gas tax in the history of gas taxes. Like,
and that makes a huge difference, right?
Oh yeah, it does. Like
for me, it definitely would. Yeah.
Like you can have like Sweden has a gas tax, for example, and has had for a long time, as well as on. I'm thinking of gas tax, but the thing in Sweden, the way it works in Sweden is like it goes up just a teeny bit every year.
Mm-hmm.
So people can adapt and like get used to the changes and get new cars and etc. But France kind of just bungled it all up and did the worst kind of possible thing ever, which obviously in the French tradition leads to
the most neoliberal way possible, right?
And but the demands that the Yellow Jackets have to like fix that are partially, I would say, like more environmentally friendly than what Macron did. And like deals with a lot of social issues within France, because France has social issues that are kind of based in this neoliberal hellscape that has been France for the last 40 years. At the same time, though, like the Yellow Jacket uprising, I think it's nice. I think it happened. I think it's good that there is like public outcry about social issues and stuff like that. At the same time, there have been internationally and within France a lot of like hijackings of the movement by far right extremists, and that's the case in Sweden, for example. The Yellow Jackets in Sweden are just fascists. Yellow Jackets in the Netherlands, a lot of them are just far right extremists. And it's hard to disconnect that to the original one in France, right? Because that's not just spontaneous. I think my opinion there is that I think it's good, and I think it's within France. I think it's good that people are like voicing outcry. But I'm really worried about the outcry taking this, finding solutions in easy answers, as is happening outside of France a lot, and I'm worried that might happen in France as well. Because the first time you watched like the uprising thing, then it's like, oh, I have the solution, just kick everyone out, and that's it. And that's why outside France this is far right, but France does have the uprising within France has better solutions to that.
Yeah. I mean, what I found really interesting is like, so a lot of people have been sort of talking about like what this is about in ways that I find kind of interesting. So like on the left, they say it's like it's anti-austerity. It's sort of like it's a working class uprising, which is probably definitely true. One thing I find interesting about that is like, so would we consider a carbon tax, like a tax on carbon, like if it was a blanket across the board carbon tax, would that be austerity? I don't know in and of itself, right? But it's probably because Macron's doing other neoliberal stuff about cutting taxes on the rich and fucking over people.
The gas tax impacts like the working class a lot more than it impacts anyone else. Like one of the demands of the protests are, for example, to shift the tax away from cars, still have a kind of gas tax, just to have that, but not as much, but kind of shift the burden away from cars to planes. Making air travel more expensive, because air travel is less widely used by poor people, and it's more used by rich people who can afford to take a plane trip every now and then. And for the tax to be there, I think it's more productive. But because it impacts rich people a lot, I think it's also more unpopular because the rich people lobby against it. And that has been the case in Sweden too. Like Sweden had a proposed gas tax on planes, and it's been it was one of the biggest issues of the election for some reason.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I definitely think like some type of carbon pricing, carbon taxing, like has to be on the table for going forward, because we have like it's the best way to reduce carbon output. And so and a lot of people on the right have been taking this and saying, okay, we can't do carbon taxes at all, they'll never work. And I think that's a huge problem, because these people, they have a lot of influence in the wrong places, and so there might be some people and it has big impact. So like in the United States, let's say that there's a left-wing government, maybe it's not a Bernie person, maybe it's like a sort of mostly progressive, like are they going to say, well, we can't do a carbon tax now because it'll undermine our ability to do other things in the future, because there's going to be a huge backlash and we're just going to lose, right? So I don't like that discourse, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot to be understood. Like you're saying, like it needs to be targeted at the right economic strata. It needs to be sort of, maybe there needs to be some like price, like, do a carbon tax, but give people like a tax rebate or something so that they get money back, so they don't feel the effect as much. I think it just needs to be managed well. I think that a lot of people have taken this also to be like, well, economic policy under leftist ideals is impossible, and I don't think it is. I think it is possible. I just think, like as you say, you target at the right economic strata, but also that just the shifting of priorities, right? But I also think, I honestly sometimes think that within like leftism, that
like some of the things that we take for granted within like just the industrialized world are things that aren't good for the earth, and it's things that society and the globe cannot survive if everyone has one. For example, a car. Now, a lot of working class people need cars to get to work, to do their thing. But I think that the issue there is not to necessarily like put a gas tax, to like not have a gas tax in order so people can still keep driving, and that, because that will ruin the earth. But instead shift that conversation away from the necessity of having those things and going into like a more popular demand for like public transportation and a redesign of our urban centers, and a redesign of, because that is what we need. Unfortunately, like even during like fully autonomous luxury gay-space communism, people, we like everyone can't have a car. Like that that it will be unsustainable, that will destroy the planet. And at a certain point, like it's really unpopular to say, and I really hate saying it, but like sometimes a gas tax is what you need, but obviously not in the way that Macron did it, because that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
Yes, it's the worst.
But there are ways of doing that. There are ways of having like a harsh economic policy without much negatively affecting the working class. The trick is just affecting the rich a lot more, because they need to be feeling the impacts.
I mean, what kind of worries me about the strikes in France is like it kind of makes me feel a bit like Brazil, where it's like it's not an exact analogy, obviously, but it's like there's these institutional forces that are attacking this one party. The people who are going to use that and catapult on it are the fascist faction, right? So I mean, I definitely feel like the fascists in France are going to try and say, oh, we'll see, like you should have voted for us because we would never do this because we don't give a fuck about the environment. And that's just like, I feel like the scary thing that could happen. But it's not the protesters' fault. It's not their fault if their movement gets hijacked, right? It's our job to like try and stop that. But that's like a media war, and those have been very hard to fight. It's been extremely difficult to fight that because the far right side is very well funded, and you know, like they have an interest in making sure that the fascists get in power because they have an economic advantage if they get into power, right?
Yeah.
If you're someone who sells oil to France, and the fascists are like, hey, I will cut the gas tax to zero. You're like, here, let me put some money in a fund that's gonna do some AstroTurf advertising on Facebook or whatever to like do propaganda.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I think I'm worried that will happen. I'm not super sure it will, because France has this like every couple of years, this like huge ass protests. And it's kind of tradition at this point. Like every single year around this time, there are huge protests in France, and it all just goes back to like, and it has been for like decades. This political instability in France, and I think it's possible that like right wing extremists will have like the opportunity and like take the initiative on that. I think it's more likely that either nothing happens, or that there will be kind of like a neo-social response to it. But we'll see how that goes. Because historically, France has been pretty good with like curbing fascism and curbing like right-wing extremism.
I think the real hope in France is that the Socialist Party gets their head out of their asses and like actually like win.
Oh,
stop being fucking morons.
Oh, Jesus!
That would help, maybe.
Whenever I hear
about head out of your ass and like run a good election.
Whenever I hear about the socialists in France, like even when they win, it's like, how are you messing this up? Like, how are you doing this?
I think the French just hate their presidents. I think that's kind of the burden of being a French president. Like, because the guy before was a socialist, and he was like hated. Like they fucking hated him.
Oh yeah, but that has been like. They hate all French presidents.
Yeah, they hate them all. Yeah.
I mentioned this in another stream a couple of months ago, I think, that like the difference between like European and American elections, right? Because in American elections, the incumbent gets the advantage. Almost every time the incumbent has a big advantage. That is never the case in Europe. That has never been the case in Europe. If you are in power within Europe, then people hate you. Even if you're doing good. Like, even if you are doing good things, people will just fucking despise you. And I have no idea why that is. But the historian in me wants to say it's because, like, no offense to America, but Europe does have a bit stronger tradition of just replacing our rulers when they become angry. And
I think Mehdi Hassan, he said something kind of interesting. He said because the United States, the president is the head of state and the head of the government, it's kind of, again, this is why I keep saying this, the president is an emperor, and we view the president as our emperor, and he's the one who is withholding our power, and he's sort of like a symbol of American power. And so to undermine that is to undermine our sense of power and value.
But that is also a very uniquely American thing, right? Because a lot of countries have presidents, but they also, like, the president is more of a symbolic position that is the head of state, and then you have a prime minister that does other things. And when in countries that it's not the case, there's usually a monarchy or like a duke or whatever. And I find it really interesting that America has decided to merge like 3 significant branches of government within one, which is partially just the being of the president, basically, but also the symbolic head of state. Because it's really weird to me that the president goes out and like does basically mall openings and football games and shit, and it's like he's supposed to be working.
No, we want our emperor to show himself all the time, and so we can feel good about ourselves.
But you also merged, and I think this is also why your emperor comparison is really good, because you also merged that position with the commander-in-chief. So he's the
head of the military.
Yeah, he's the head of the military, the head of symbolic power, and the head of executive power. He's an emperor. Like, he's not that far off from being an actual emperor at this point.
I mean, it really, like, I feel like in 1,000 years from now, that's kind of how we'll look at the presidents. The same way that we look at the Roman emperors, very similarly.
Oh yeah, probably.
They just had term limits. That's about it.
God, like some eras in Rome had that too. It's weird to me, like, oh well, America at least. Well, it's not hereditary. It's like, well, you have the Kennedy dynasty, and you have the Roosevelt dynasty, the Bush dynasty.
Here's a really interesting between, it was like 1918 and 2016. It was like 100 years. No Republican president was ever elected unless the president or the vice president was a Bush or a Nixon. Okay, just think about that. So one party for 100 years was either Bush or Nixon.
Congratulations, you're the new Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, that's fucking insane. That's fucking insane. Yeah, and it's just kind of weird because there are certain people. Mitt Romney is a guy like this. They just kind of float around, right? Like Mitt Romney, now he's in the Senate. He's going to try and run for president again, and
of course it is.
I don't know if there's any, like, there could definitely be an opportunity. Like, these people, they just float around, and as long as we know you and we kind of like you, you can become, the emperor. Like, it's
it's a political popularity contest more than an actual election of a policy.
No, absolutely.
Terrifying.
It's about, do I like this person? Can I have a beer with them? Are they good at throwing a baseball?
That strikes me as odd too, because whenever I look at people doing polls or like talking to people on the street, and it's like, why do you support this candidate? It's like, well, they seem nice. I can have a beer with this person. It's like, why the fuck would you? Why the fuck would you? Why is that relevant? Because that doesn't really happen in Sweden. Like, I could I like the current prime minister, although he's not. He's just a provisionary prime minister. We still do not have a government. But like, I would never have a beer with him. Like, that's weird.
Yeah, I think it's slightly overstated. So like the people who I would say are actually really popular are like Obama
Yeah.
and Bill Clinton.
Yeah, they're
I think
celebrity.
I don't think that George Bush really won because he was like nicer than Al Gore. He won because of institutional power. Like the Supreme Court overthrew the election, right? Like, did Trump win because he was more likable, or was it because
Yeah.
there was massive voter suppression and there was interference in the election and
Yeah.
there's more forces. Like I think most of the people that I think were really popular were like FDR, both of the Roosevelts, Dwight Eisenhower. Ronald Reagan is a great one.
Yeah.
Very like people just liked him for whatever reason, even though he was a fucking idiot.
Well, he's an actor.
He's an actor, yeah. I mean, he definitely had an appeal. But those are the types of people where they're actually like, yes, I want to vote for them because I like them,
Yeah.
right? But I think people go too far. Like, just George Bush,
Yeah.
was it really about? No, it's because he won the first time because of institutional power, right wing power, and the second time because he fought a war.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that a lot of time, this is a good example of what we talked about earlier, right? How the system is the politics, because as you mentioned, like the Supreme Court basically decided an election. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by a lot.
Yeah.
Basically,
and Hillary Clinton failed massively, by the way, right? Like that's a lot of it too. She failed massively to appeal to actual core Democratic voters.
But even then, I don't think that like that is the thing that I also want to talk about. Like, I don't think that matters, because it's really weird to me that the popular vote is not the one that matters in America. That is insane to me.
Yeah, it is insane.
When people talk about like, oh, Hillary failed, like, no, she didn't. She won by millions of votes.
Yeah. I mean, this is a constitution written by slave owners. Right? These are slave owners wrote this because they're thinking, oh shit, what if slaves started voting? That would be bad for us. So we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
We need to make a system where, and the funny thing is, like, the system was supposed to prevent Trump. Actually, the idea that they had was like, the electors, if there's someone like Trump, they should vote against him. That was the whole point. That was the whole point of it, and that's gone now too. So the system is like now built to keep a sort of minority rule. The majority is totally against these policies. The midterm tells us that. The 2016 election even tells us that the majority of people are against these type of policies.
Yeah.
But there are institutional frameworks in place that keep them in power. That's a huge problem.
Yeah. I really think that even if Democrats come into power, I don't think that's going to be enough. I think that there will have to be like major fundamental restructuring of the entire American like state or empire or whatever you want to say, because even the constitutional basis is really old and needs updating.
Oh, there's so many, like, it's like when you're if you go on like a website with a really bad like 1990s code base or something, it's like, what the fuck is this? Just like everything looks weird and things just don't work. But then people try to bootstrap stuff on top of it. It's like, no, you need to just start over.
It's literally the website for the European Union. If you haven't checked it out, this is also a side note, by the way. Like, the European Union is the biggest market economy in the world. The European Union is one of the most powerful forces in human history. Its website looks like it was built in 1981 and hasn't been updated since. Like, when people say that, like, the reason I'm against the European Union is because it's unwielding and I don't understand it, they're talking about the website, because you can't look them up online. They don't have a homepage where you can just go like, oh, look, what is my like kind of government doing?
That's so funny.
Oh yeah.
Okay. That's so funny. Yeah.
This is. I'm gonna start finishing up right now because it's.
I think that's a good idea.
If you have any questions, it's been. I hope I haven't been ranting too much about shit I don't know about. So I hope everything is going okay. Again, if I talk about something that I don't, if I'm talking out of my ass, let me know so I can stop.
Mhm.
I
think you've been good so far. I think there's nothing to
so
nothing
far.
to worry
I love
about.
that. So far, yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna keep an eye on you though, but so far, yeah, you're doing good. Yeah, it's fine. This has been a great hangout. Thank you for joining in, and thank you everyone in the chat. I'm sorry that we probably missed a lot of comments because we had a long rant. If you have any like last minute questions, feel free to do so. I'm gonna keep going for around 4 minutes, I think. So we finish at past proper, so I can have like a proper actual 1.5 hour stream. It's been twice as long as I intended, but that's just the way these streams go. That's how things are at any time. Yeah.
Do you want to approach this question sort of that Geston asked, like electric cars with nuclear plus renewables will be sustainable? I guess like the Green New Deal. Have you guys in Sweden talked about any type of like a Green New Deal type thing? Like basically, okay.
Not really. Like
yeah,
the Swedish energy discussion is not really discussed a lot. We talk about a lot of other things, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we do buy a lot of our power from like Polish coal plants. But Sweden is kind of clean per capita compared to a lot of other countries. So it's not seen as an emergency issue, but it's an okay issue. The thing is, I'm kind of worried about like electric cars with nuclear and renewables. I think nuclear and renewables will work for society. I don't think electric cars will. And the reason why I don't think that is because an electric car, just making it causes a lot of pollution. Making electric cars specifically uses a lot of like rare earth minerals, which are hard to dig up, and much of it is imported from either China or India, which both of them are not great on the environment. China is getting better though, so that's good. But that's just because they know that climate change in China has a large effect on China. So I think that nuclear and renewables can work, but I really don't think that people will have access to an electric car. The thing I'm looking forward to, however, is like just having this. But that's just because I'm this leftist, right? I'm looking forward to a concept of having public transportation, but not necessarily in the form of like trams or subways or buses. Those are all great, and we should have more of them. We should have like much more investment in public transport, all kinds of public transport. But I have this kind of dream, right, where like every city or village has like a parking house just filled with a couple of cars. So not everyone has it, and it's not many cars per person. But you don't always use a car, right?
Yeah.
Like you use a car. Like I grew up in the countryside, and we used our cars maybe two or three times a week, going shopping or driving someone somewhere, and that's it. Most of the time, the car is just standing still and doing nothing. And if everyone's going to have that, that's a lot of like raw earth material that has to be processed and converted and shipped and used just to stand in a garage for 98% of the time. I think it's just like having publicly owned cars that people can just like, oh, I'm using this now and then I'm gonna return it later, would work. But I don't think the technology is there for that yet, and I don't think and like that wouldn't really work unless the entire Earth is in on it. Because unless the entire Earth is in on it, then people are just gonna steal them, because that's what happened with bikes. Because people do it with bikes.
Yeah, I'm definitely sort of like I don't know if that's going to be enough, because like the transition timeline is kind of probably a little bit too long for the amount of time we have to fix the problems that we have. And in the short term, like all this, if like building solar panels or building electric cars, just like you said, it creates pollution and other problems in the short term. So yeah, I think we need probably a more comprehensive way of solving the problem, and finding a way to ethically reduce the amount of carbon output is is probably going to be a necessity, because the only other alternative is, well, basically what they call geoengineering, which is like, it's not a
Dim
joke.
the sun.
Not a joke. Like, these people are freaking serious, and they're gonna start shooting shit up into the atmosphere to try and reduce, because these things are banned for now, right?
Yeah.
Right now, you can't do experiments where you shoot stuff in the atmosphere and see what happens. Try and either reduce carbon, or I don't know.
Yeah,
do
we
something
did.
else.
We did that for a while. Like fucked the
Yeah.
Earth up too much.
But what's scary to me, and this is what kind of worries me, is like, with the discourse about the carbon taxes and stuff, people are going there now. People now are like, okay, this isn't going to work. And I've seen people say technology is the only solution. What they mean is, we need to fuck with the planet with technology and try and fix the things that capitalism broke.
Yep.
And I feel like that, because the scary thing to me is when all the elites say, okay, that's the only solution, then it's like post-apocalyptic shit. It's like,
Oh yeah,
oops,
like
oops, we fucked up. Now, we're turning into Venus.
I mean, yeah, we're approaching Mad Max universe.
Yeah.
I'm really I'm not optimistic about the environmental future. I've been panicking about that. Like, I'm not panicking per se, but I've been thinking about that a lot the last couple of months with the latest report. It's like, we're not gonna be able to do this. I honestly don't think that we're gonna, unless something extremely drastic happens. I think that we're fucked. We're not like the human race isn't fucked, and the Earth isn't fucked, because the Earth can survive anything.
The Earth
and the human race isn't fucked either, because there will always be like Elon Musk in a bunker in New Zealand,
exactly,
to repopulate the Earth. But what the world we have right now isn't super good, but it's the world we have, and I don't think it's gonna survive this environmental crisis. Honestly,
the global poor are gonna get so fucked.
Yes.
And I think it's really important, because that's going to be the defining issue of our time, and we have to treat these people like, we have to treat them well, because they're going to be coming to our countries, because capitalists in the West made a bunch of money for 250 years, and the output of that is a bunch of people who can't live in the tropics anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's that's, to me, going to be one of the defining political problems, because even the United States military, they know climate change is happening.
Yeah.
They know it's going to happen, and they know it's going to happen, and they know, because again, it's a global empire, so it has to be prepared. These types of things, and they say what's going to happen is borders are not going to matter anymore, because there's going to be massive amounts of people moving from countries that they can't live in anymore, massive droughts, inability to farm. So people are going to just have to leave. They're going to, people in Bangladesh or whatever, they're just going to have to leave, because they can't live there anymore. And they have a human right to live, and they need to be taken in somewhere by someone.
Yeah. I've seen, we're approaching summers in different cities where it's literally too hot to survive. No, I know you're laughing because it's absurd, but it's, and it's hard to know how to react to that, right? But big mega cities, because they exist.
Oh my God. Oof.
Because they already exist, right?
Yeah.
There's this thing called the urban heat island, and they become just worse and worse the thicker and more dense the city becomes, and they just keep getting denser. They're urbanization hasn't stopped. We're still doing it. We're still doing it 150 years after we started urbanizing cities properly, and it's still growing, and we're approaching a time now when cities more commonly in China and India, where the population is higher and the cities are huge, where it becomes too hot, because the heat can't ventilate anywhere except for up, but there are skylines everywhere that are high that lock in heat very well.
Oh shit. Oh my God.
So it's become this. We've reached a point now, kind of cyberpunk dystopia, where cities have become too big for air to move around. where cities will have to start pumping in fresh air from outside the city in order to just have it be livable.
That's
because
insane. I've never heard of that.
because people can, well, it becomes, it's not super hot, right? Because people can live at like, I don't know Fahrenheit, so I apologize for people that only know Fahrenheit. Like, people can survive at, say, 30 degrees Celsius in a city for a while. But if people have to live in 30 degrees, 32 degrees Celsius every single day, day and night for months, that fucks with the body and the health. And after a while, the body can't handle that, and kidney failure starts kicking in because people sweat too much. And this is a thing that has been happening. Like, every heat wave has, all over the world, has become worse and worse and worse, and people in cities die more and more and more and more, and this is going to keep getting worse. And all of this combined with like rising sea levels, everything, I don't know. I'm not optimistic. Like, I am honestly expecting a Mad Max future at this point.
Yeah, I definitely like if right wingers freaked out about 1 million people leaving Syria, I mean, imagine 10 million people leaving a group of countries along the equator, or or in the tropics. Like, that's really scary future, and those people are going to be so vulnerable. Like, like they'll be at the whim of, unfortunately, whatever governments are in place.
Yeah, and it's, from the track record, it's not looking good.
Yeah, it's not looking good. But that's why there's been a lot of discourse about should the left be for open borders or not, or whatever. Like, I think we have to understand that human beings should have a right to move. They have to live. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you can't live in the country you're in, the country doesn't matter. And no country, we can't be like nationalists in the sense that, oh, well, there has to be a nation so that we can have socialism or whatever. Like, no. Like, we're here for humans, not for nations, or whatever the fuck kind of concept you want to build on top of it.
Yeah, and I think that, like, even from an environmental impact, open borders is like, it's, even then I think it's pretty okay, because the countries that are going to be mostly affected by this aren't like Western rich countries. Western rich countries can like fortify city centers, can like fix up their infrastructure somewhat, and protect this. Like, the Netherlands, for example, has gone too far. Let's like they've done that for over 200 years, just building like water walls against the ocean and reclaiming land from the ocean. Like, Europe and Europe isn't going to be affected by the climate crisis, like, at all. And I think that like letting people in here, if they can't survive in their own homes because like you can't farm anymore, it's just makes sense. And because like it's not like the entire world is going to become inhospitable, right? It's just going to become less habitable slowly. So it's not as if literally every single person in the world is going to try to move to like my apartment next week. That's not what's going to happen. What is going to happen is going to be like a slow but steady, and it's going to be like increasing over time, stream of people who have who can survive in the current circumstances and have to relocate. And while it sucks, while that sucks a lot, I think that a lot of Western countries can do that easily, while also tackling the climate crisis to prevent that from happening later. I don't think that we're going to meet the goals of what the UN wants, though. I think it's going to go past that, unfortunately, to reach the catastrophic levels, as they say. And I'm going to call it now because it's been a bit late. And as always with these streams, we end on the apocalyptic note, where everything is bad and everything is awful, and we're all going to die.
Well, I think people being able to leave countries and come to countries where they're richer, I think the net effect could be positive. But there's going to be a lot of bad. There's going to be a lot of bad stuff, and it's not the future we want for the world. But I think we can create a better future if we are humane about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think saving the Earth is possible. But right now it's not looking too good. Hopefully, maybe the energy crisis is the environmental crisis is just what we need to set off, the second a new modern age of revolutions. Hopefully not as violent as the last one. But social unrest tends to do that. But they also tend to fix a lot of things. Hopefully everything will be sorted out before that. I just really hope people start like investing more in clean energy and start replacing coal plants, because I'm so tired of coal plants. Anyway, thanks so much for following the stream. Thanks so much for joining the stream. This became a discussion instead of a question, which is good. I like that. Let's see. Some streaming updates, because I'm doing shit more. I'm just gonna bring up my own schedule so I know what the fuck I'm doing. Which means I have to go to my own Patreon to look at it. So Wednesday, I am gonna let's see. I'm just gonna mute. There we go. So Wednesday, I'm going to be having a share to stream on. It's a Swedish share to stream. It's for a store that's called Webhallen, the Web Hall, and it's going to be it's basically just going to be a charity hangout thing, where I play games all night and raise money for like support groups, for all kinds of things. I'm actually not sure what it is, because I haven't read that much, but I was invited, and it's for charity, so I'm gonna join. It's gonna be good. The 15th, which is next weekend, yes, Saturday next weekend, I'm gonna have the first Patreon Ask Me Anything of the month, where I answer your questions. If you are a patron of mine, you can ask me pretty much anything, and I will answer it in a similar format to this, except it will just be me answering a bunch of questions and ranting a bit more. And we're going to have another one of those, the 29th of December, which is after the holidays, where it's another Patreon Ask Me Anything holiday edition, where you can ask me, normal shit again, just about anything, maybe about the holidays. Hopefully, I'm going to have another video out by then. We'll see. However, I did come up with my latest video, and I'm fairly healthy now. So who knows? It might be possible. My dear friend Philosopher King has left the chat, so I was gonna ask him to say goodbye, but he means it. And then the December 30th, not the 31st. Maybe the 31st, I'm not actually sure about the timing there. I'm going to have another one of these Hangouts, which is going to be a bit of a celebration about the year, talking about 2018, talking about how awful it's been, talking about like all the good things. Just having a nice one. And that's going to be the day before New Year's Eve, which is a Sunday. It might be New Year's Eve itself, probably not, because I'm going to be hanging out with friends, and hopefully so are a lot of people. So I'm going to have that Sunday the 30th. Because that is so late into the holidays, and I might not even be in my apartment then, because I might be at my parents' place, I might push that into early January. But hopefully it's going to be this month. And yeah, I think that's it. You can find me on Twitter. That's probably how you found this video. You can find me on a bunch of different things. This is my streaming channel. If you are subscribed to my main channel, you can. This is a different channel, so you can subscribe here. And I am going to now eat some dinner, and then I'm going to go to bed. And then later in the week, I'm going to play some. I might have some just good old-fashioned nice charity or just video game streams, having fun, hanging out, that are a bit more casual. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.